The African savanna stretches endlessly beneath a blood-orange dawn, its golden grasses whispering secrets of survival that only the ancient winds remember. In this primordial theater of life and death, where every sunrise could be your last, a figure emerges from the shadows of an acacia grove. This is Kael, though he carries no name in the way we understand them, only the deep recognition of self that separates him from the beasts that rule this unforgiving landscape. His calloused hands grip a crude stone tool, its edges sharp enough to slice through hide, but barely adequate for the nightmare that stalks these plains. The morning air carries the metallic scent of blood, and Kael's nostrils flare as his primitive mind processes what his more evolved descendants would call fear. But this isn't the paralyzing terror of modern humans watching horror movies. This is the raw, electric panic that keeps prey animals alive for one more heartbeat. 3 days have passed since the beast claimed his mate, Neera. 3 days since those terrible fangs, longer than a man's fingers and curved like crescent moons, pierced her throat as she gathered roots near the river's edge. Kael had watched from behind a boulder, his entire world collapsing as the massive predator dragged her lifeless form into the tall grass. The other members of his small band, 12 souls barely more advanced than chimpanzees, had fled in terror, their primitive voices shrieking warnings that echoed across the valley. But Kael remained. The creature that haunts his waking thoughts and torments his fitful sleep is Smilodon gracilis, though such scientific nomenclature means nothing to a mind that thinks in images of survival and revenge. What matters is the reality of its presence. 8 feet of rippling muscle wrapped in tawny fur, powered by jaws that can crush the spine of a zebra with a single bite. Its eyes burn like amber coals in the darkness, and when it moves, the very ground seems to tremble beneath its massive paws. This is no ordinary predator stalking ordinary prey. This is the apex hunter of the Pliocene epoch facing off against something unprecedented in Earth's history, a hominid who refuses to run. Kael's transformation from scavenger to hunter began 2 million years before the first pyramid would rise in Egypt, before the last ice age would reshape continents, before modern humans would even dream of existing. His species, Australopithecus garhi, represents a crucial evolutionary bridge, still primitive enough to knuckle-walk when necessary, yet advanced enough to fashion tools and plan beyond the immediate moment. The morning hunt begins with a ritual older than civilization itself. Kael places his palm against the red earth and feels the vibrations of life moving through the soil. Somewhere out there, the saber-toothed beast is stirring from its daylight rest, its empty belly driving it toward another night of killing. But today, the dynamic shifts. Today, the hunted becomes the hunter. His makeshift spear consists of a fire-hardened wooden shaft tipped with a razor-sharp obsidian point, painstakingly knapped over countless hours until it could pierce thick hide. Strapped to his waist with strips of dried sinew, he carries additional stone blades and a crude sling fashioned from animal gut. These tools represent millions of years of evolutionary advantage, compressed into objects that fit in his calloused hands. The landscape around him tells the story of a world in transition. Massive volcanic eruptions have recently reshaped the Great Rift Valley, creating new hunting grounds and forcing ancient predators into desperate competition for dwindling prey. The climate oscillates between wet and dry periods, turning lush forests into sparse woodlands, then back again in geological heartbeats that span thousands of human lifetimes. As Kael moves through the morning shadows, his heightened senses catalogue every detail of his environment. The distant trumpeting of a mastodon herd signals water nearby, and where herbivores gather, predators follow. The sharp crack of breaking branches suggests something large moving through the underbrush, while the absence of bird songs in certain areas warns of lurking danger. His tracking skills, honed by generations of ancestors who lived or died based on reading nature's subtle signs, reveal the beast's recent passage. Massive paw prints pressed deep into the muddy bank of a seasonal stream tell the story of a creature, confident in its dominance, taking long, measured strides that speak of absolute power. Claw marks scored into the bark of trees mark territorial boundaries older than human memory. But Kael notices something else in these tracks, a slight favoring of the left rear paw, a barely perceptible asymmetry that suggests an old injury. This observation, requiring cognitive abilities that separate early humans from every other species on Earth, becomes the foundation of his hunting strategy. Even apex predators have weaknesses, and the capacity to recognize and exploit those vulnerabilities represents an evolutionary leap that will eventually lead his descendants to dominate the planet. The sun climbs higher, its relentless heat creating shimmering mirages that transform distant trees into dancing spirits. Sweat beads on Kael's dark skin as he follows the trail deeper into territory that belongs more to nightmare than reality. Here, the scattered bones of previous kills create a charnel house monument to the beast's efficiency. Zebra skulls bleached white by the African sun lie beside the massive rib cages of extinct elephants, while smaller bones from countless antelope and early horses create a crunching carpet beneath his feet. The psychological impact of entering a predator's killing ground cannot be understated. Every instinct screaming through Kael's nervous system demands retreat, demands the sensible choice of finding easier prey or scavenging already dead carrion. But something deeper drives him forward, a combination of grief, rage, and perhaps most remarkably, a crude understanding of cause and effect that allows him to conceive of ending the threat permanently. Mid-afternoon brings the first direct confrontation. Kael rounds a cluster of granite boulders and finds himself face to face with the beast's afternoon resting spot. The massive cat lies stretched beneath a sprawling fever tree, its flanks rising and falling with the deep rhythm of sleep. At this distance, perhaps 30 yards, every detail of the predator becomes terrifyingly clear. The iconic saber teeth, each one longer than Kael's thumb, protrude from a mouth designed for delivering instant death. Muscles ripple beneath the tawny coat like steel cables wrapped in silk, while retracted claws the size of curved daggers rest hidden within massive paws. This is Smilodon gracilis in its prime, 400 pounds of evolutionary perfection adapted for killing large prey. Its skull, proportionally larger than any modern cat's, houses jaw muscles capable of generating bite forces that would make today's lions seem weak by comparison. When those amber eyes snap open and fix on Kael's position, the moment crystallizes into the kind of primal standoff that has decided the fate of species since life first crawled from the ancient seas. The beast rises with fluid grace that belies its massive size, every movement speaking of coiled power ready to explode into violence. Its lips pull back in a warning snarl, revealing not just the famous saber teeth, but rows of smaller fangs designed for gripping and tearing flesh. The sound that emerges from its throat bypasses rational thought and strikes directly at the most primitive regions of Kael's brain, a bone-deep rumble that speaks of death incarnate. But Kael doesn't run. Instead, he raises his spear and takes a calculated step backward, creating distance while maintaining eye contact. This behavior, unprecedented in the beast's experience, creates a moment of confusion that Kael exploits with tactical brilliance his descendants would recognize as purely human. Rather than fleeing in panic like every other prey animal, he's studying his opponent, looking for advantages, planning multiple moves ahead. The standoff stretches across heartbeats that feel like hours. The beast's massive head swivels slightly, its predator's instincts processing this strange new dynamic. Prey animals flee, rival predators posture and retreat, but this small, upright figure with its sharp stick presents something entirely outside the saber-toothed cat's evolutionary experience. When the attack comes, it arrives with devastating speed. The beast launches itself forward in a blur of muscle and fury, covering the distance between them in 3 massive bounds. Its roar splits the afternoon air like thunder, while those terrible fangs gleam in the sunlight like polished ivory daggers. For any other creature on Earth, this charge would mean certain death. The overwhelming force and speed of 400 pounds of apex predator moving at full velocity. But Kael has been preparing for this moment since Neera's death, and his response demonstrates the cognitive revolution that separates early humans from every other species. Instead of standing his ground or running, he executes a maneuver that requires abstract thinking, spatial reasoning, and split-second timing. He dives to his left, while simultaneously thrusting his spear toward the beast's injured rear leg. The obsidian point finds its mark, slicing deep into the old wound and sending a spray of crimson across the dusty ground. The beast's charge becomes a stumbling crash as its injured leg gives way, sending the massive predator rolling through the thorny underbrush in a tangle of claws and fury. But the victory is temporary. The wound, while painful, is far from fatal, and now Kael faces an enraged saber-toothed cat with nothing but his primitive weapons and his wits. The beast regains its footing with frightening speed, its amber eyes now blazing with pure hatred. Blood streams from the reopened wound, but rather than weakening the predator, the injury seems to ignite an even more ferocious determination to kill. It circles Kael with measured steps, its massive head lowered and those terrible fangs positioned for a killing strike. This dance of death continues as the sun begins its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the killing ground. Each feint and counterfeint represents thousands of years of evolutionary pressure, compressed into moments of life and death decision-making. The beast's power and natural weapons against Kael's intelligence and tool use, a conflict that previews the ultimate relationship between humanity and the natural world. Kael's breathing comes in controlled bursts as he maintains his defensive posture, spear point tracking the beast's movement while his free hand grips a stone blade ready for close combat. His mind, primitive but remarkably adaptable, processes multiple scenarios simultaneously. The injured leg creates an opportunity, but exploiting it requires getting close enough to those terrible fangs to ensure death for one of them. The final confrontation begins when the beast's patience expires. With a roar that shakes leaves from nearby trees, the saber-toothed cat launches a different kind of attack, not the straight-line charge of their first encounter, but a series of calculated leaps designed to overwhelm its opponent with multiple angles of approach. Left, right, feint center, then a devastating lunge aimed at Kael's exposed flank. But evolution has gifted early humans with something no other predator possesses, the ability to learn and adapt in real-time combat situations. Kael's second response demonstrates this advantage as he uses the beast's own momentum against it, dropping to one knee and driving his spear upward into the soft flesh beneath the predator's ribcage as it passes overhead. The obsidian point, honed to surgical sharpness, penetrates deep into vital organs. The beast's triumphant roar transforms into a shriek of agony as it crashes to the ground, its massive body convulsing as life begins to ebb away. But even mortally wounded, a saber-toothed cat represents mortal danger, and Kael maintains his distance as the predator's claws rake futilely at the air. The death throes of an apex predator create a primal symphony that echoes across the savannah. Other animals, sensing the disturbance, fall silent as one of the most feared hunters in Africa breathes its last. The beast's amber eyes, so fierce moments before, grow dim as its massive heart pumps the last of its blood onto the red earth. Kael approaches the still form with caution, born of hard experience. Even in death, those terrible fangs command respect, and he uses his spear to probe the body before confirming that his nemesis will never again terrorize the valley. The victory brings no joy, only the grim satisfaction of a threat eliminated and a mate's death avenged. But as he begins the long journey back to his band, Kael carries more than just the memory of victory. In his primitive mind, new neural pathways have formed, creating connections between planning, tool use, and successful outcomes that will be passed down through countless generations. The psychological barrier between human and apex predator has been broken forever. Word of his achievement spreads through the scattered bands of early humans like wildfire. The story grows with each telling becoming legend, then myth, then the foundation of something unprecedented in Earth's history, the understanding that humans need not be prey, that intelligence and tools can overcome raw power, that even the most feared predators can be defeated by creatures a fraction of their size. This realization triggers a cascade of evolutionary changes that reshape not just human behavior, but the entire ecosystem of prehistoric Africa. Hunting groups form, sharing knowledge and techniques. Toolmaking becomes more sophisticated as the demand for effective weapons drives innovation. Social structures evolve to support coordinated attacks on large prey, laying the groundwork for the complex societies that will eventually span continents. The saber-toothed cat's death represents more than just the end of one predator. It marks the beginning of humanity's rise to dominance. Over the following millennia, early humans will develop increasingly sophisticated hunting techniques, gradually shifting from scavengers following predator kills to active hunters capable of bringing down the largest and most dangerous prey. Climate changes that would have previously spelled disaster for human populations become opportunities for expansion as tool use and cooperative hunting allow our ancestors to adapt to new environments. The ice ages that periodically reshape the planet become highways for human migration rather than barriers to survival. But perhaps most importantly, The psychological transformation that begins with Kael's victory creates the foundation for everything that makes us uniquely human. The capacity to conceive of long-term goals, the ability to overcome natural fear through rational planning, the understanding that intelligence can triumph over raw power when properly applied. As the first stars appear in the darkening sky above the African savanna, Kael makes his way home, carrying more than just proof of his victory. He carries the future of human civilization in the form of a revolutionary idea that we need not accept our place in the natural order, that we can reshape the world through intelligence, tools, and determination. The campfire that welcomes his return burns brighter than usual that night, fed by the excited voices of his band as they hear the tale of the first human hunter. Children who will never know the terror of saber-toothed predators listen with wide eyes, absorbing lessons that will guide their own descendants toward an unimaginable future. 2.9 million years later, when modern humans look up at the same stars that witnessed Kael's triumph, they see a world utterly transformed by the choices made in that primordial moment. Cities stretch toward the horizon where once only grasslands grew. Technology that would seem like magic to early humans carries voices across continents and sends mechanical eyes to distant planets. Yet beneath all our modern sophistication, the same fundamental drive that powered Kael's spear thrust still motivates human achievement. The refusal to accept limitations, the determination to overcome obstacles through intelligence and innovation, the understanding that with proper tools and planning, no challenge is insurmountable. The saber-toothed beast that once terrorized the African savanna sleeps now in museum display cases, its fearsome fangs reduced to curiosities for school children to marvel at. But the legacy of the first human hunter lives on in every act of courage, every technological breakthrough, every moment when intelligence triumphs over brute force. In the end, Kael's victory over the beast represents the moment when humanity stopped being just another species struggling for survival and became the shapers of their own destiny. The moment when the hunted became the hunters and the natural world became our dominion to protect, explore, and ultimately transcend. The African dawn that witnessed the birth of human dominance continues to rise over landscapes we have transformed beyond recognition, carrying within its light the eternal promise that intelligence, courage, and determination can overcome any obstacle, even those with saber teeth and claws as long as daggers,